Hi everyone, I'm Margaret, and in this video I'm going to show you how I like to do the magic ring, also called the magic circle, sometimes called magic loop, start for working crochet stitches in rounds. So the general idea with the magic circle or magic ring is that instead of starting your crochet piece by working chain stitches for a foundation chain, you're going to attach all of the stitches in your first round directly onto one or more loops like this. So if this is the working end, you can imagine you're attaching your stitches so that they're all grabbing onto this ring. So that way, once you have the number of stitches for your first round, you can close this up by pulling on the tail to tighten it up. I like to do the version of this where instead of just one loop forming the center of the ring, there are two loops. So essentially we're going to create a structure like this, but same thing, you would take your working yarn and start attaching your first round of stitches onto both of these together. So that way you can, again, close this all up. You can see though, if you just pull the tail on that, you're going to be left with that second ring. So we'll get more into how to properly close everything up later. But first, let me show you how to create that double loop structure for the ring in a way that you can more easily start attaching your stitches. So for that, go ahead and pull out a length of tail from your yarn and hold the tail of that yarn with the hand that you normally hold your hook in. You're going to start with the tail in front of your other hand, so closer to you, like on top of your palm like this. Once you have that, what you're going to do is wrap it once around your index finger. So keep this pretty loose because we're going to be pulling out some more tail as we go. So tail starts in front, bring it behind, back in front, and end so the tail is behind your hand again. So we've created one loop here. Next, we're going to make the two loops that are going to form our magic ring around our next two fingers, so around our middle finger and ring finger. So for that, you can pull out a little bit more tail, and then from behind, bring that tail back in front of your hand and back behind. So you have a loop around these two fingers. And again, if you need a little bit more yarn there, go ahead and give it a tug and make that second loop, continuing to wrap in the same direction. So when you finish, the tail should be behind your hand like this. And any extra tail, go ahead and clamp that between your ring finger and pinky. So the whole structure should look like this. So what we have is these two loops right here are going to form our magic ring. And this little section of yarn is going to be the working yarn with a little bit of tension on it so that we can join and start our first stitch here. So from here, if we just take this off, it's all going to fall apart. So we need to secure it. So for that, take your hook and insert it into both of the loops like this and bring it all the way up so that it's at the top of your middle finger. And don't pull up too far, like keep it nice and close. From here, you're going to yarn over. So you're going to grab a little bit of this working yarn and you'll twist the hook so that the pointy bit is facing down towards your finger and pull that through both of the loops. And once you clear the loops, go ahead and twist the hook so that it's facing upwards again. And then glide it forwards. Again, keep it nice and close to your finger like that. So we now have a little working loop right here. And to finish this bit off, we're going to do one more yarn over. So we'll grab a little bit more of the yarn here. And again, twist as you're pulling through so that the pointy bit of the hook faces downwards, and pull through the working loop. So this will sort of secure loosely these two loops right here, so we have a more stable ring. So at this point, take your fingers on the hand that you're holding the hook with, pinch that little stitch right here, and slide your other hand out. So now you can see we have that 2 loops structure with the tail on one side and the working yarn up here. So usually, I think most patterns don't consider this, basically it's a slip stitch as a first stitch. So if your pattern says to do an extra chain 1 before your first stitch or chain 2, you want to start counting that after this. And for how to hold this, I would recommend just tensioning your yarn however you normally like to do it. And then with the fingers on your yarn tensioning hand, you can hold onto both loops of that ring. Leave a little bit of space so the hook can go in, but otherwise you can kind of put a few fingers in there, have your thumb on top, so that way the ring will be stable as you're pulling more yarn through it. So as we start to make our first stitches, it should look like this. So 2 loops, tensioned yarn, and then gently kind of hold, and you want to hold in front here of where the hook is. So for this example, I'm going to work 6 single crochet stitches, just because that's probably the most common instructions for working in rounds. If you're working an amigurumi or one of those stuffed toy project where the single crochet stitches are worked in a continuous spiral. So for that, I'm not going to make a starting chain. I'm going to just start making those single crochet stitches. So all of them, instead of being attached to, a foundation chain, they're going to be attached or grabbing onto the magic ring right here. So for our first stitch, we'll insert the hook through both loops of the ring and then single crochet stitch, right? So you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and you're going to go back through whatever it was you inserted the hook into, which in this case was the ring. So we'll pull up a loop all the way back through the ring. So now we have 2 loops on the hook, and to finish that single crochet stitch, I'll do my second yarn over and pull that through both of the loops. So at this point, I have my magic ring and 1 completed single crochet stitch. So this would be stitch number 1 in the first round of my project. And it can get real hard to tell where the beginning of your round is, especially for the very first one. So I would recommend putting a stitch marker through the top of your first stitch. So you can find your working loop, and it should be kind of sprouting out from a little V. And that's what you can put the stitch marker through, like that. So that way you don't need to search for your first stitch. So put the hook back in, go ahead and tighten up that working loop. And here I've done 1, so I'll do 5 more single crochet stitches. All of them are going to be worked directly into that magic ring. So insert the hook all the way through both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop all the way back through like this, yarn over again, pull that through both loops. So that's my second single crochet stitch. Let's do the third. Go into the loop, yarn over, pull all the way back through. So you've got your 2 loops right here on the hook, yarn over again, and join those 2 loops together by pulling through both of them. So as you are making your first row of or round of single crochet stitches, they're going to start forming a little tube around the ring. So it'll look like a row rather than a closed circle until we tighten all of this up. So let's do the last 3. So 1, 2, and 3. And this whole time I'm always holding on to both loops of the ring. All right, so that was 6 single crochet stitches. So you can see here we have our stitch marker in the very first one. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So from here, we are ready to close up the loop. So when I'm doing that, I like to pull the working loop up a little bit bigger just so I don't lose it. And I find it easiest if I orient the whole thing so that the stitches are on the bottom and the 2 loops that form the ring are on top. And then the working yarn is on this side with the tail over here at the start of the stitches. So at this point, if you see anything's kind of wrapping around, go ahead and just untangle it a bit like that. And another thing that will help is if your stitches are kind of far apart, you can kind of squish them a little bit closer. So for that, with one hand, hold on to both loops of the ring. And with your other hand, you're going to grab sort of the tube part here, so the bottom of the stitches, and keep holding with this hand onto the ring, and then you can slide your stitches down so they're sitting closer together, and then that will make the 2 loops that create the ring a little bit larger. So from here, we need to close up these 2 loops. So you can't just pull on the tail for this version that has 2, because what's going to happen if you do that, so we have our 2 loops like this. If you just pull on one like that, it'll close up one of the loops, but once that's closed, you won't be able to close this second one. So what we're going to do is we're going to close the further loop first. So I'll show you what's going on here without the stitches on, and then I'll show you how to do that while you're holding all of your finished stitches. So basically, you can see here that the tail is directly connected to one of these 2 loops. So the first thing we're going to do is pull on the tail to identify which of the 2 loops is connected to it. So here you can see it's this one that shrinks when I pull the tail. So this is connected on one side to the tail, and then on the other side right here, it's connected to that other loop. So we're going to pull on the side of the loop that's connected to its friend over there, and we're going to pull that up so that the other loop shrinks up, and then at this point you can pull the tail and then close up the other loop, and you won't be left with that other one just hanging out there. So that's the main idea. It's a little easier to see without all the stitches on, but to do that here, again, we're going to first identify which of these 2 loops are directly connected to the tail. So go ahead, one hand, hold the little tube of stitches that you have and gently pull on the tail with the other hand. So here I can see that it's this loop that's shrinking up. So this is the loop that's directly connected to the tail. And the side of this that's attached to the tail is the one that's going to be kind of going into the tube. So it should be, yeah, this side right over here. So if we were to follow the tail through the tube, we would go this way and then around, and then this side here again goes through the tube and is connected to this back larger loop. So if this is the side connected to the tail, we're going to grab the other side of that smaller loop And again, while you're keeping this little tube of stitches stable, you're going to pull up on that so that the other loop closes up. And you don't need to pull it super tight all the way closed. You can do like kind of 90% closed like this. So at this point, you're left with the one loop of the magic ring. And remember, that's a different loop than your working loop here that the hook was in. So go ahead and close this up by pulling on the tail until, again, it's about like 90% closed. So make sure it doesn't catch on the stitch marker and shrink up that other loop. So the reason that you don't want to pull this super tight yet is because if you do that, this first stitch is going to get very tight as well, and it's going to be difficult to work into. But now you can see that your first 6 single crochet stitches there are kind of joined up together, and the first stitch in the round is close enough that we could start working into it. So at this point, if you're following kind of a basic amigurumi pattern, the next round, so round 2, is worked directly into the first round, so like a continuous spiral, and usually the instructions will say something like work 2 single crochet stitches into each of the stitches that you made in round 1. So another way to say that is to crochet 6 single crochet increases. So I'll go ahead and start that off. So I'll put my hook back in, and our first 2 single crochet stitches in round 2 are going to be worked into this stitch right here that we have our stitch marker in. So if you need to, you can kind of loosen that stitch first and then take the stitch marker out, and then go ahead, hold the stitch right in front of where you're going to go in, and then make the first single crochet stitch. And usually they'll have you working through both loops like this. So yarn over, pull back through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So this would be stitch number 1 in round 2. So again, it's really handy to mark the first completed stitch in each round, so you can put your stitch marker through the top right there. And then for our second stitch in this round, we want to place it into the same spot that we attached this first one. So I'm going to go into here for that second stitch as well. So insert the hook, yarn over, pull through the stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So that's how I would start the second round. And at this point, usually it's pretty safe to go ahead and close this up all the way. So for that, you can just grab the tail and pull until the center really closes up. So there's no gap anymore in the center. So at this point, that whole magic ring part is done, and you can just follow your crochet pattern or do whatever it is you're doing without worrying about this. And at the end, if this is kind of inside the finished piece, you usually don't even have to sew in the tail. And that is the magic ring technique. So I'll go ahead and finish this second round. Again, I'm just doing an example that follows a very common structure for the first 2 rounds in a pattern. So for my next 2 stitches, I'm going to place them in this stitch right here, because again, we're increasing the number of stitches. So we're going from 6 stitches to 12 stitches in the second round. So I'll go ahead, place the first one and the second one in that same stitch. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches in my current round. I'll do the next 2 into this stitch right here. So 5 and 6, 7 and 8 are going to go into here. Next two will go here. 9 and 10, and then 11 and 12. Oop. And I'm going to make sure I'm working with the working yarn and not the tail. So 11 and 12. So here I am now back to the beginning of this round. This was my first stitch. So round 3, this is where I would place the first stitch in round 3. So for magic ring or magic circle, again, that's the technique that lets you start working in rounds in a way that lets you really completely close the gap in the very middle. And you can use this technique for, working in turned rounds or joined rounds as well for things like granny squares or similar motifs. It doesn't have to be just for amigurumi. Yeah, so that's how I like to do it. If you found that helpful or, entertaining or relaxing, go ahead and give this video a like, and I'll see you in the next one.